So in much of this course, we've been doing ES5. ES5 is the sort of shorthand name for the actual JavaScript standard that was in place when we developed this course, ECMAScript 5. ECMAScript 6, or ES6, is also available and partially supported in most of the modern browsers that we're all using today. And that's something that's been a moving target. As the browsers have advanced, they've implemented more of the ES6 features, and it's getting to the point where they're much more common now than they were even just a year ago. And if you're working on the server side in an environment like Node.js, that's a JavaScript environment for the server, an awful lot of what goes on there is written using the features that are available in ES6. Simon's come for a visit. This is Simon the cat, if you haven't met him yet. He does this sometimes when I'm talking on camera. So anyway, ES6 is very, very heavily involved in node development. So you're going to come across code examples that show you ES6, and you can use these in the browser mostly safely, but you certainly need to know what they are when you see them. So one of the things that we're going to look at right now is arrow functions. So arrow functions are a different way and a shorter way, a more compact way to express a function in JavaScript. So let's take a look at this example that we saw in a previous video, video 5.4. And this is where I've set up an array of strings. And you may remember that what we had done in that example is we used array.forEach to run a function on every element in that array. So I'm going to go in here and put in a forEach function, use the forEach method, and the forEach method takes a function as its argument, right? We're essentially passing a function as a value into this forEach method, and then this function runs on each element in the array. So I'm going to open up my JavaScript console, and if I go ahead and run this code, we will see that it does exactly what we expected it to do, right? It basically just for each item in the array, it outputs it to the console, which is what we expect. Now, if we want to use arrow function syntax with this function, there's a couple of things that we can do. For example, we can eliminate the word function and just put the argument in parentheses, and then this arrow, which indicates this is a function, and the thing to the left of the function is the argument, and the thing to the right is the function itself. And if I run this again, let me clear the console and run it, it does exactly the same thing without the function keyword. Now, as it turns out, I only have one argument that I'm passing to this function. I don't even need the parentheses. I can run this again, and sure enough, it still works. Well, let's make this shorter. This function only has one line in it of code, right? So we can actually eliminate the brackets because this is just a single statement inside this function. So now I could do this. Let me clear the console, run the code, and it's still working. This basically is what an arrow function is, right? I've compacted the function down to its basics. The arrow indicates we're doing a function here. The thing on the left is the argument to the function. The thing on the right is the function itself. So let's look at, let's actually bring this example back to multiple lines. So now I've got a console that could have, let's say I have example 1, and then I put console.log on a separate line. All right, got an extra parenthesis there. Okay. So here I use the brackets because I've got more than one line in my function, right? So these brackets basically create a statement that has more than one line. If I hit run, what am I missing? Oh, I'm missing that. Okay. So now that works, and now we can see, of course, these lines are printing out on separate lines in the console because they're two separate console.log statements. So there we go. Now, if we had more than one argument that was being passed, again, we need our parentheses. So let's say we know that this function for the forEach method actually takes, let's go look this up, mdn, come on, mdn array object. We're going to go look up that for each and make sure we're using it right. So here's my array object. And if we go down here and find the for each method, we can see how it works, right? So here's like ours, we're only getting the one element in our function and printing it out. If we go down here, we can see that that callback function actually can take 3 arguments. It gets past the current value, the index number in the array on the one that we're on, and the whole array itself, just in case you want to modify the array. So if we go back to our code here, I could add index and the array, and maybe here I want to say example index, and then the value, and here it is. Let's clear this console and run it again. So you can see here that I've got the 3 arguments to the array, and that's why I've used the parentheses. Now this can get a little hairy sometimes because the syntax, depending on how it's used, can be a little confusing. For example, I could do a function assignment, function expression here. I could say my func gets right. So here is I've defined a function called myfunc, and I can call it. And it says hi like it should. So this is a much shorter way well, let's see, what would that look like if we wrote it out the long way? It would be myfunc long would be function it would look like this, right? So this is equivalent to this. You will get the hang of reading these. Sometimes you can actually have them nested several deep if you've got functions inside of functions. And we may look at an example like that as we get later on into the course. There are a few other differences related to arrow functions, and some of these things we haven't entirely studied yet, so we'll get to them. But the implicit arguments property that exists inside a standard function so that you can get to the list of all the arguments as an array, that is not supported inside an arrow function. Other things that are different, the this keyword, we haven't gotten to this yet. We will get to it in a later lesson, but if you are familiar with the this keyword, in arrow functions it works differently than it works in any other kind of object. So there are some other changes under the hood, and there's a link below this video in the course if you want to go in and look at some of that stuff. These things are important, and you will end up, as you get further into JavaScript over time, you're going to come across them all the time, and you'll start to use them and feel comfortable with them as well.